Welcome back to the Human Frequency. This past week, we've been working on the polar vortex, and today we'll talk about what the polar vortex is and what we did to correct it.
We'll be talking about what it really is, because you got to be discerning. I feel like I'm going to be saying this at least 17 times throughout this episode, is that we have to be discerning about the information that comes to us, because most of it is incorrect, and it's designed to lead you astray. I mean, you'd think that would be obvious by now, but I feel like I need to say it, and I'll be saying it a lot.
So you could take what we say with a grain of salt too, because you have to look at everything and figure it out. But the polar vortex is something that's been in the news all week, and it's over now. And we can explain what it is, why that happened. We could talk all about the weather warfare that was actually going on in the past week. But this week was a great week, actually. This past month has been great for good news in Southern California regarding the etheric war.
Mm-hmm.
We had
California in general, not just Southern, but the whole state has been receiving ample precipitation.
Tons of snow and rain, and other good news related to the life force in California. On January 22nd, there was a report on ABC 7 regarding increased humpback whale sightings reported in Orange County. So back in January of 2018, there were 4 humpback whale sightings. And partway through this January, there were 42 sightings.
Quite an increase. I mean, the whales typically come up to Southern California coast this time of year to feed on krill. I sound like David Attenborough, don't I?
Yeah. The humpback whale
grows fat on a diet of krill and squid. Well, maybe not squid, but squid.
Plankton.
Yeah, plankton. Yeah, they feed on plankton. But at least I sound like I know what I'm talking about.
Well, they do come here to eat, and I think breed. I'm not exactly sure, but
I think they breed in warmer waters. But the point is, they come here, and if they're coming
in increased numbers,
then that means that the prey, the krill and the plankton, are also in increased numbers.
Right.
So the whole food chain is blossoming and growing to a level we have not seen in years and years.
Well, a level I've never seen. Where we live this year, I saw many coyotes. And this is the first year I've seen any coyotes. But all of a sudden, there were a lot of them. I saw bobcats for the first time this year. I mean, not 2019, but in the last year is what I mean. In 2018, particularly before it got really snowy, we were seeing a lot of wildlife, and now they're kind of hiding out. But I saw a lot of hawks, too, throughout the whole state of California in 2018.
Yeah, lots of birds of prey.
Yeah, even I did a blog entry recently about a hawk hunting in Hollywood. It was circling right over the Hollywood Vine area, just circling around hunting for something. So that's increased rat life in Los Angeles, too.
Yeah. Circling, looking for cheap Steely Dan records. Or for hipsters going to gastropubs to feed on.
I think hipsters think $20 is a cheap record, though.
You're probably right.
They like to spend money.
Inflation really has just gone absolutely insane.
Well, that's bad news, but I'm going to focus on some good news.
Okay.
So here's some more good news about LA. On January 28th, another ABC 7 story reported LA sees crime drop in 2018. And in the year 2018, there was a 8.2% drop in homicide, a 12.4% drop in rape. Shooting victims were down 4.5%, and gang crime was down 8%. And Mayor Garcetti attributes this to more police officers, but we know better. I don't think that more police officers would reduce these crimes.
Oh, no, they would make the statistics go up, in fact. At least the time I spent in LA seeing what the LAPD does in the streets is not exactly going to make those numbers drop. But nice try, Eric.
But we did gift Los Angeles very, very heavily since 2014. So that's years and years of orgonite buildup, not just in LA, but around the whole state of California. And everywhere improves with orgone energy. People are happier, healthier, calmer. It's not just that chemtrails go away. It's not just the air pollution. It helps us because ultimately we're talking about energetic warfare. So while people focus on these things as separate issues, it's actually all related to the energy of the atmosphere and the energy around us, which we want to be life affirming. We want a healthy orgone energy. And that's what we do when we put orgonite all over a city is we decrease the deadly energy that's there from the cell towers and all of the many, many wireless EMF devices going off. And we increase the orgone energy.
And having lived in LA almost 2 full years after we discovered orgone energy, what better thing to do than to start with Los Angeles for putting tower busters around. So yeah, we did quite a bit in the time that we were in LA and still continue to this day.
Yeah, we have many times gone back into LA and Orange County and done areas that we didn't saturate too thoroughly. So we do keep on working at it. And there was another little piece of news here regarding weather media. On January 23rd, Intellicast merged with Weather Underground, which I just like to call Wunderground. And incidentally, they're also owned by the Weather Channel. So now we have Intellicast, Weather Underground, and the Weather Channel, all owned by the same company, and all giving slightly different forecasts.
Yeah.
So go figure. But at that point, I lost one of my favorite weather maps that I like to use on my blog reporting, which was the Precipicast, which would show the dramatic precipitation coming into California. And the way that it was shown on this map was so nice because you could look hour by hour and see the forecast for the next several days of rain. And it was very nice to see, and it also helped us to visualize the weather war in a way that we could use our mind power to bring the rain in, which we're going to talk more about when we get into the polar vortex.
With all of that said, it should be no surprise why it went away.
Right. So that's the only map that went away. It was funny. I went to my usual Intellicast page and it said, view all maps. It said, we have all the same maps we used to have. They had all the same maps they used to have, except the one I used on my blog. So I found some new maps, which was good. I found a new radar map through there, and I've been using that, and that's helpful. And there's also some maps on NOAA's website that are very helpful in showing the rain, although that site is designed to be confusing. So I try to find stuff that I can explain and that's easy to look at, that's easy to see. Like the satellite imagery we use. That's colored in a way that's easy to see what storm systems are coming in.
Does NOAA have an arc?
They should, because with all the rain that's been coming into California, we're all floating away.
I set you up for that one.
Well, in weather news, there's been some really extreme weather on the West Coast. And by extreme, we mean real winter weather. California, Oregon, and Washington State have all been experiencing tremendous amounts of precipitation. These are the places that we've gifted heavily, especially the Pacific Northwest in 2018. We went to town in Seattle, Tacoma, the whole Puget Sound area, the entire coast, Aberdeen, all the way down south to San Diego. So we've done a lot of orgonite gifting in that area. And they actually got snow in Portland and Seattle. And
I know nobody's going to do this, but if you go to the website and go to the best of blog section, you can see the entries that we did those days when we did these big giftings in the Pacific Northwest and through the Sierra Nevadas and down the coast. You can see all of these things. It's all there.
It's pretty amazing how much snow they got up there, too. And I lived in Portland for 8 years, and it almost never snowed there. Snow is considered rare in the Pacific Northwest. And ever since we gifted Portland in 2016 and the Oregon coast and inland, they've been getting more snow. And this year, after doing Seattle, it's amazing how much snow they got up there. So that was very, very good news. And here in California, we had tremendous snows in the Sierras. There were 6 feet of snow on June Mountain on February 3rd alone. 6 feet in one day. And then within 3 days, they got up to 8 feet of snow. I mean, these are tremendous snowfalls. It's nice to be able to report on some of these good stories regarding the weather, because it's usually just drought propaganda and just hammering it into our heads that we don't get enough rain here. What did they say recently when we had a little break in the rain? They said, first storm
in weeks. It sounds like we've been waiting so long for this. Actually, it was about 13 days.
Probably.
So
because it was
basically
raining
2 weeks. So yes, they could technically say first storm in weeks, but what does that sound like versus what it actually was, which was about 2 weeks? It's you see what the linguistics are trying. They're using these words to program people,
exactly,
and to get them to picture a different reality in their heads than the actual reality. Which, if they just reported on that honestly, which of course we know they won't, so that's where we come in.
Well, it's interesting because they choose different dates to start rain years and snow years. For example, we had a really great total in downtown LA so far in this year. They start the rainfall year in October 1st. I guess that's where they start counting precipitation, according to whatever news source that was. I'm trying to remember which one I saw that one in. There was an article that said that in downtown LA there were 12.4 inches of rain, and the average is 7.5 inches. So that's pretty excellent, and that's since October 1st. Then another website started the snow year on July 1st. So we have people starting the years on different dates. So it's kind of hard to get the same data consistently when you're starting on different dates. That's
called cherry picking. And this is a very common tactic that the media uses to advance a particular agenda of theirs. When they want something to seem a certain way, they'll just change the parameters to suit them. So that's what they're doing when they want us to think that normal weather is abnormal. And if they can't just outright lie about it, like right now, there's so much precipitation, it's very hard to lie about there being a drought right now. They just shift the parameters a little bit one way or the other until they have just a statistic that, again, seems a certain way. But if you actually look into it, you'll find that it's completely the opposite. Well, more often than not, about what they're presenting.
Starting the snow year on July 1st is a good example of that. If you start the snow year in the middle of the summer, you're going to have a very disappointing start to the snow year. Exactly. So this is how they do it, and they want us to think that when it's dry in the summer in LA or Southern California in general, that that's somehow abnormal. Wow, we're in a drought because it hasn't rained all of July. It doesn't rain in July here. That's the dry season. That's just how it's always been. Maybe in the future we'll get more rain in those times of year because the energy is flipping and we're getting more rain in general. But it is normal for it to be dry in the summer in California.
Yeah, you and I are from LA. It does not rain much at all between, say, Memorial Day and Halloween. There's almost nothing. That's normal, but it's being portrayed as abnormal.
Right. And even in the Midwest, because of this polar vortex, there was extreme cold in Chicago, and the lake froze over. But it didn't freeze completely, but it froze a lot. But then apparently that's pretty normal for it to freeze in the winter, at least in parts.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's very, very cold there. So things are kind of exaggerated. All these news stories will be, but right now it's pretty hard for them to downplay it. Like this rain right now, they can only downplay things like the rain by talking about flooding and mudslides. So they'll talk about the negative effects of the rain. And really, we don't want rain to be negative. We don't want weather to be negative. The reason the swings are so extreme is because of the blockages that are being unblocked with orgone energy. So when something's been suppressed for so long, it's just going to come out like that. So they will make it sound worse than it is because it is kind of extreme, but it actually is the Earth's natural healing process.
And the flip side to that coin is the downplaying of good news, which we point out all the time. You do it on your blog more or less constantly. You're deconstructing these articles. And again, this goes back to using linguistics to convey a particular point, or rather to convey a particular lie. Is that one of the ways that the media likes to downplay good news is, for example, rain totals, to go in line with what we're talking about in this episode. They will use different amounts to convey the same thing. Like if there
were 3 feet of snow.
3 feet of snow,
we saw an article that described 3 feet of snow as a yard of snow.
Yes.
And I've never heard snow talked about in terms of yards. But 1 is lower than 3.
Exactly. Just like $19.95 is lower than $20. It's the same tactic. It appears to be less than. You see what they're doing here?
So it just kind of there are these tactics of downplaying good news and exaggerating bad news, outright lying, and there also is a lot of corruption in municipal water supplies where whoever is in charge of that water is draining it. Like Big Bear Lake is now 17 feet below normal levels. Now, that's what it was like during a very bad drought there back in the mid-2000s, before Rainbow Thunderheart came up with the medicine wheel ceremonies and restored the weather and brought the snow back. but now it's down again. But given the amount of precipitation we've had in the last few years, which has been tremendous, especially this year, it's just making up for everything. We've got flooding and swollen rivers everywhere. For Big Bear Lake to be down that low, that tells me it's being drained. And then I also found out that there's a water company that does take water from that lake down below Big Bear, so that lake is being drained. Here in the mountains where we live, there was a pond in a park that was drained in about a day. I saw it go from being full to there being nothing in it. And the newspaper said it was empty because of the drought. So draining water sources is a great way to make it look drier.
All I can say is, got to watch the movie Chinatown. Because this is exactly what happens in that movie. I won't give away any plot spoilers. You got to watch it yourself. But you just watch that movie and you'll see it's no different today. This is going on all over the place. And yeah, if you're seeing these artificially low lake and river levels, that's incongruous with the amount of precipitation that's coming in at that time of year, you have to wonder what's going on. And water company corruption is one of the oldest stories there is. So it's still going on today.
Yes, it's built into it. Corruption's built into that industry because that industry is controlling a resource which is renewable. It's created inside the earth. It's called primary water. It's not coming from the rain and snow. That's part of it, but the main water that people are drinking is coming from in the earth, in aquifers, and it's in constant supply. So there is a website called primarywater.org that talks more about that, so you can learn more about it. But water is not scarce. Water is a renewable resource. So in this last week, we've been working really hard on the weather. We've been working hard to break down a blockage, and that's what was causing the polar vortex. Now, when the polar vortex happens, and this is a pop meteorology term for this, this is what they call it, cold air coming down from the Arctic and slamming into the center of the continent. But something caused it to get there. Something caused it to not come to the West Coast and be diverted up and around. And that's exactly what happened this week when the polar vortex began. We started out in the first half of January with very wet weather, and then there was a break in the rain. It became DOR-ish. There was a DOR attack, and the DOR is the deadly radiation that is life-negating and prevents rainfall. It's what causes chemtrails to stick. It's what causes smog to linger. DOR is the deadly radiation, and we talked about it all the time on our show, but I'm just going to reiterate that it's coming from cell phone towers. There's this inordinate amount of attention put on a facility called HARP in Alaska, and well, whatever that is, if we could get up there with a couple of tower busters, I think 4 tower busters would neutralize it. I'm not really that concerned about HARP. The concern is what's near all of us, what's gridded throughout the land. Weather is not manipulated through one antenna array in a corner of the world. Weather is manipulated through antenna arrays placed across entire continents, gridding the land everywhere. That's how storms are steered. It's all DOR that comes out of the towers, which prevents the hydrogen bonding of water molecules because it is positively ionizing, and that prevents water molecules from connecting to each other and forming clouds. So you have that. It's also an unhealthy energy for us, and it also causes smog and chemtrails to linger. So when we change that energy by gridding the orgonite everywhere, then we flip it to OR, life-affirming, healthy for us, healthy for the atmosphere, clears pollution, and encourages cloud formation through the hydrogen bond. So that's the quick explanation, and there's way more on the website on this, and we have other episodes where we talk about it. But what happened with the polar vortex is that it's always a push and pull of energy. Even if you've gifted orgonite somewhere, your work is not done because the parasites have many DOR sources, and they will concentrate them and work with them and direct energy at certain areas. They will use whichever ones are not neutralized to do this.
Yeah, I get a lot of emails from people saying, I have orgonite and I still see chemtrails. Well, this is an ongoing war.
Right.
And I think the analogy that we use on our FAQ section is that if it's autumn and you rake your lawn clean, you shouldn't be surprised when the next day there's a whole mess of leaves covering it again because it's it's just what's going to happen, and there is a push and pull all the time. There are battles within the war, but the war is far from over.
Oh, it is far from over. It's actually very much underway. Most of the humanity is under attack. Most of humanity is under their control. Let's face it. We've got 99% of the population, and I'm being very generous with that. It's a lot more than 99% that's under complete mind control and has no control of their own thoughts and doesn't even have the ability to observe the world around them.
And all done voluntarily too.
Yes.
It's interesting you mentioned HARP and how that amongst the so-called alternative media is a really big focus.
Yeah,
and
because it's a diversion.
Exactly, it's a diversion away from the actual culprit, which is
in your pocket,
the cell phone towers. but well, I'm getting to that. On a more micro level, there's a lot of attention on the smart meters, and not any attention so much on the real culprits, which are cell phones and Wi-Fi routers. Now, I'm not saying that smart meters are good. Quite the opposite. They are very bad. But if you want to talk about insidious, there's nothing else but smartphones topping that list.
Oh, yeah, that's
period.
a very good point.
And there's so many people that they want to be able to use their smartphones. And for a lot of these people, Orgonite is like their magical solution. Hey, I have something now. I can still use my smartphone. No, there is no substitution for getting rid of the smartphone. And I'll say it again and again. You have to get rid of these technologies and use the Orgonite for external EMF that you have no control over.
So why are we talking about EMF when we're talking about the polar vortex? It's because it's completely connected with it. So we're not going off on a tangent here. The polar vortex was created by EMF. And when I say DOR, that's a deadly radiation. Wilhelm Reich's term for deadly radiation. And EMF is just the most prevalent form in our world today. It's all around us, everywhere. And in his time, nuclear radiation was one. I mean, that's supposedly around us too. But I think the main focus here is EMF because that is really like in our homes, in our cities, and that's what's preventing rain. So the polar vortex was achieved through an energy blockage over the Pacific. And these jet streams that are supposed to be moving west to east, very straight and even across the globe, they are being forced up and around. So it hits the wall. It's an energetic fence. It hits the wall and gets shot up and around into the central continent, creating the extreme weather for them and creating warm and dry conditions in the west. And now you would ask why, if we've neutralized the whole frequency fence on the west coast, would this happen? Well, the answer is they're always using what's still available to them. But because so much less is available to them, within days, we were able to break down the blockage. So we can actually talk about exactly what we did over that week to break that blockage down. Because if we had not neutralized the whole west coast frequency fence with orgonite, breaking down this blockage may not have been possible.
Exactly. And I can remember in 2013 specifically, there was a lot of incidents of these polar vortexes going on. And this is well before we discovered orgone energy. And we were still very much in that geoengineering chemtrails fear matrix and completely unable to do anything about it and fearful of it. So we were seeing on those same NOAA maps these polar vortex things going on for days and days and days, and nothing was doing anything to stop it. But what we've seen this year is completely different. With so many of those arrays neutralized, we were able to correct this blockage in the jet stream before it got out of hand.
Right. So on the weekend of January 26th to 27th, the polar vortex was in effect. Here in Southern California, it was DOR-ish. It was warm. It was hazy. So it had that kind of chemtrail sky, flat white haze, unseasonably warm. And we took the Chembuster, which is a large orgone device that looks a little like Wilhelm Reich's Cloudbuster. We use it to move jet streams. We use it to move atmospheric orgone, and that is a tremendous mind connection with the device. It takes you to be able to do it. So you're using that device, but you're also using the power of the mind, and the device is actually activating the power of the mind. So I took the chembuster due north and aimed it right at the moisture way up north in the Arctic that was being diverted into the central continent. And I drew from the north. And by drawing, I moved the machine. It's a free energy device, not actually having any moving parts. The guy that made it for us, John Robson, called it a machine. You could actually listen to an interview with him on this channel from a couple of years ago. And I dragged the orgone in the atmosphere. I aimed it right at where that system was, thousands of miles up there, and just dragged it 3 times, drew it from the north down into California. So that was just the beginning of the correction. That was what I did to bring about the opposite of what was happening. We were having it going up and around. I'm bringing it back down. So then on the 28th, I moved it because I saw that this was starting to correct. I could see that things were starting to smooth out a little in the jet stream, and I moved it to the west, and I drew from that direction because that's where the moisture actually is supposed to come from. When
the jet stream is normal, it's going west to east in more or less straight line.
So I drew from the west on January 28th, and during that day, the DOR lifted, and by evening, there were orgonite clouds in the sky, and the orgonite clouds are like the little puffs. They're like in little ripply puffs. Now, those ripples are not just harp. I used to say it was harp ripples, but it is a combination of the deadly energy and the healthy energy, the DOR and the OR battling it out. And ultimately the OR tears that apart and it forms these little puff clouds that are still in the ripples. And then it looks a little like bubble wrap, and then they start to collect a little more and then they evaporate. And once those clouds are gone, it makes way for natural rain clouds. So on the 28th, the DOR lifted and the door was opened for rain from the west. And it took a couple days, but on January 31st, rain and snow were pouring all over California.
And I want to point out a couple of things here. First of all, this is Geo Restoration. This is not us moving jet streams around with no impetus for doing so. What we are doing is correcting the manipulation and the modification that is being done to create extreme weather, to create artificial drought that's unnatural, etc. So we are just correcting. We're not, like I said, we're not altering with no reason for doing so. The second thing I want to point out is that connection you talked about, Sharon, between you and the device, that connection is 100% impossible to make with the use of smartphones and wireless technologies. Don't kid yourself. There is a lot of people think, oh, I'm above it. No, it is completely impossible, period.
Yes, that is correct. It is impossible. And that's why I don't use those devices. I've eliminated them from my life. So I spend most of my time in a very energetically clear environment. We don't have Wi-Fi, no cell phones, no smart meter, none of that stuff, no microwave oven, no CFL light bulbs. Anyway, it's very, very peaceful energetically, which allows your mind to develop those abilities. Orgone energy also opens up the psychic abilities and the connection that you have with creation. This is love, Orgone energy is the energy of love. It's the energy of God. And so we're not doing anything against nature. Everything is done with love. Everything's done with the earth in mind and restoration of the creation. So when we're doing this and we're activating the orgone in the atmosphere, it's the connection we have with our earth and with our sky that's doing it. And it is the power of God.
Yes.
So that's what we were doing. And I was putting a visualization into it to activate every orgonite piece, all the 6,000 or so of them around the U.S. West, to just activate that grid and really just putting a lot of positive energy into it makes a great difference. And you can try this yourself at home. Put some positive thoughts into your own orgonite and our orgonite out there, because we've probably done it near you if you live in the West. If you're in California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Arizona or New Mexico, we've hit somewhere near where you live. So even Colorado a little bit. And there's even a little bit on the East Coast. I mean, there's some stars scattered around in some random places where we managed to take it with us on planes.
There's even one in West Virginia.
There's one in West Virginia. So that was what was going on. And by February 1st, we were really kicking ass. California was getting more rain than the Pacific Northwest. And it was forecast on that day that parts of California would get up to 7 inches of rain and the whole state would get rain in the next 24 hours. And it did happen. And on that day, USA Today reported, and I will quote, "With the polar vortex in full retreat, the USA's wildest weather shifts to the west." So they really used my language on that. I was pretty happy to see that, because with the polar vortex in full retreat, that does, indicate this is warfare. This was an action of war to try to create miserable, dangerous weather conditions for people in the Midwest and dry us out here in the West. It was an act of warfare. And we used the energy of orgone, the energy of God, of the cosmos, of the earth, of life.
Life inherent.
And we used it to make it retreat. We made them retreat. The ones doing this.
We used it to fight back, and they lost, and they retreated. But they will be back again. That's the key to this whole thing, is that you have to understand there isn't just one thing you can do, and then you get to relax. It doesn't work that way.
This is etheric warfare. If you want to regain control of your mind, you're going to have to take control. You're going to have to be brave and give up your addiction to EMF, and you will have to remove things from your life that you thought were necessary. If you're wanting to make this jump, if you want to open up these abilities, you could start now even with a smartphone. I started with, I never had a smartphone. I had a dumb phone, but I had one when I started doing this work, and it was suppressing my consciousness, but I still got great stuff done. You could still get a lot done. Even if you're still using a smartphone, you could still get a lot done, but you're never going to get to the level you want to get to. So I know where you want to get. You want to ascend, don't we all?
We sure do. And hey, within 6 months of us starting to work with Orgonite, we had gotten rid of our Wi-Fi.
Yeah, we ditched the Wi-Fi within less than 6 months of starting to work with Orgonite. And we ditched the cell phones a couple years after we started. So, I still have the emergency cell phone that's off, but turn on if we have to call AAA or something. So,
and that's what it's for, by the way.
That is what it's for. So,
and nothing more.
That is how we did it, and the results of using the chembuster and the orgonite and the power of the mind to correct the polar vortex were on February 2nd, Bayona Creek in Culver City and the LA River and its tributaries were raging. I mean, full of water. If they hadn't paved those rivers, those neighborhoods would be flooded. So I guess it's good that they paved them. But
look at photos of the LA flood of 1938 and you'll see what we're talking about. It really can get out of hand quick.
Yep. And on the 3rd, that was the date that June Mountain in the Sierras got 6 feet of snow. And they had also forecast snow for the Pacific Northwest, which on the 4th happened. We had snow in Portland and Seattle and the Oregon coast, all places that we've thoroughly gifted with orgonite, places I know very well from my time up there, and that kind of snow up there is unusual. It was always an event when it would happen. Now it's going to become more commonplace, and we had downpours all over California. So the end of the story of the polar vortex is, within a few days it was over. This is 1 week in the life of a polar vortex, and It came and it went, and now California, Oregon, and Washington are all getting wonderful winter weather. It is pretty extreme. It's something we're going to have to get used to, and it is the change that orgone energy brings.
And the media has to report on it, because with the polar vortex gone, this is now at the forefront, what we're experiencing out here. And it's great because they can't just sweep it under the rug anymore. But we have to be discerning. I guess I didn't say it 17 times, but we do have to be discerning about the information we get from whether it's a mainstream or an alternative source.
Yeah, I mean, let me add something to that story about 6 feet of snow in June Mountain. It was reported that they had 6 feet of snow, but NOAA did not measure that or did not include that in their climate report. So they're not including the 6 feet of snow in their climate data. So this is how they're going to be able to perpetuate lies about drought and global warming, is by not reporting on stuff. And interestingly, the article put it in the article itself, NOAA will not be including this data in its climate reporting.
Maybe it's because they're so busy building their ark.
Well, they really need to.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Human Frequency. Please come to our website, www.thekembo.com. Check out our YouTube archives, check out our blog, and please support us with our Orgonite store. Every bit that you give us goes back into fighting the parasites and bringing natural precipitation back into California and beyond. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.